We're going into our uh, it's almost verse by verse. We haven't skipped a verse in the book of Zechariah, but we're actually doing vision by vision. So we're going into Zechariah's fifth vision. And pretty much what we're getting into the book of Zechariah. We're going into those 8 visions God gave to him concerning the prophetic program. And we're going into his place in it, Zechariah's place. And we're going through it to make sure we detail as we rightly divide it according to the dispensation of law and prophecy. We're going through that. And so by going through it, we're kind of we'll have to backtrack and see where we were in the first 4 visions, which is on our YouTube channel. You're seeing the 5th vision now. We pretty much talked about how in the first vision it had talked about the horsemen among the myrtle tree, talking about that God's concern for Jerusalem and the difficult time promise of restoration. That's what the myrtle trees were talking about, restoration. You saw the horses, you saw the angel of the Lord, the pre-incarnate Lord Jesus Christ, them talking about this, and how the nations were at rest, and that wasn't too good in the eyes of God. The second vision came along. You saw the 4 horns representing the 4 nations that had scattered Jerusalem, and pretty much how he has 4 carpenters come along, and they will come along, and they'll destroy those who had destroyed and scattered Israel. That was the second vision. The third vision comes along. See a man with a measuring line, and he pretty much measures the area of where Jerusalem's going to go in the millennial kingdom, in the Israel's earthly kingdom, God's kingdom on earth. And so he starts measuring that, talking about the protection of Jerusalem and the abundant growth and prosperity of Jerusalem in the kingdom. Then we got to the 4th vision last time, talking about the vision of Joshua the high priest, how he was, he represented Israel and how he was forgiven, pretty much, and his clothes was changed, clothing being the garments being a representation of righteousness, showing how they can pretty much move along and do what needs to be done. There's nothing that's really going to be getting in their way. They can go ahead and do what needs to be done concerning their plans and the prophetic program. And so then there's even this foreshadowing of the Messiah that's to come, the stone with 7 eyes, and how he's going to be coming forward. So the first 4 visions reveal God's deep concern for his people. It shows encouragement, shows that there's hope. When they do come out, this is again the post-exilic Israel. They had gone through their 70-year captivity. Now they're coming out. They're being led by Zerubbabel. They're being led by Joshua the high priest. They've got prophets such as Haggai. They've got prophets such as Zechariah, and then they will have Malachi. You've got Ezra and Nehemiah who go back and they're going to rebuild and reconstruct Israel. They're going to go forth and do this. They've got the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles they can go back and read, in which they can see where did they come from? What was their genealogies? What was their lineage? What was their history about? And that's what it's there for. 1st and 2nd Kings is for the people going into the 70-year Babylonian captivity as to how did this, not so much how did it's a recording of how everything is happening on the scene, so to speak, during that time. And then 1st and 2nd Chronicles is pretty much how everything is happening on the scene, so to speak, during that time. And then 1st and 2nd Chronicles is pretty much see, oh, this is why this happened to us in the first place, as it's a different generation, a different group of people coming out than it was coming in, but it's still a faithful remnant of people. That's pretty much a quick wrap up of the first 4 visions there. But as we get into the 5th vision, we'll just kind of give it a quick summary here. But in this vision we're about to get into, he sees a golden lampstand in this 5th vision. And there's going to be 7 lamps and 2 olive trees on either side of it. So we'll get into that. And so it's going to be explained that the lampstand represents the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, the governor of Judah, and how it emphasizes that their task in rebuilding the temple, which is something that they're going to continue to need to do, it's not going to be accomplished through human might. It's not going to be of human power, but by the Spirit of the Lord. And so the 2 olive trees are going to symbolize the 2 anointed ones who will stand before the Lord and provide a continuous, quote unquote, supply of oil. We'll get to that. To keep the lamps burning. And it's going to signify a lot concerning God's Spirit during this time. And so it's going to serve as another encouraging, a 5th vision of encouragement to the post-exilic group. that have come out of that 70-year captivity. And so we'll see that here. And so we'll go and take a look at this, and we're seeing that God's going to continue to empower them, continue to encourage them, and continue to help them rebuild the temple despite any obstacles that come in their way. So we'll see this in Zechariah chapter 4, and let's see, it's in verse 1. And we see it pretty much mentioned here. Instead of kind of reading it all through, we'll kind of just start out going verse by verse. There's a lot to get through. And so we see here, and it says, and the angel that talked with me came again and waked me as a man that is wakened out of his sleep. And so you're seeing this. This is how the fifth vision is starting out now. So again, if you haven't seen or read or studied or watched as we studied the first four visions, you may want to go back on our YouTube channel, subscribe to the channel, see how we had gone through the first four visions already. And you saw a lot of, as we had said earlier, angelic multitasking as they were dealing with the, well, they, at least the visions talked about how the nations who had previously scattered Israel, now they were going to be dealt with by God's carpenters. And they were also talking about how they were going to go forth and as they were going to go forth and reconstruct and rebuild and go forth, that pretty much they were going to be dealt with as far as these nations that once scattered them. We had seen that there. We also talked about how the measuring of the land of where Jerusalem's going to go, that's going to start to take place. So the measuring is going to take place. That's a big encouragement for them. And as far as the lands that had previously attacked them, that's not going to happen anymore. God's going to make sure they're dealt with because God's upset at them. And we had seen that even Joshua the high priest, Satan comes to accuse him and say, this is the same group of people who had broken your laws. Now you're going to set them, you're going to let them go. You're going to let them walk right back in. And of course, the Lord explains or pretty much does, he's the source of forgiveness, righteousness, truth. The Lord, by his own grace and mercy, sets everything right and does everything so that Joshua the high priest can be that representative high priest of Israel. And the sins that he's being accused of are completely forgiven by God's grace. And so we talked about the sure mercies of David, how this has happened even with King David. Now it's happening with Joshua the high priest. And so you're seeing a lot by God's strength and by God's power, how things are coming into play for post-exilic Israel. And we had kind of touched on that in the fourth vision, how there's a lot by God's power, things are coming into play. Those nations wouldn't be dealt with if it wasn't for God's power. The land wouldn't be measured if not for God's power. The Joshua the high priest wouldn't be restored if it wasn't for God's power. And so he's going to talk about this here in the fourth vision, that we're seeing a lot that this vision is going to confirm what we were kind of just touching on in the fourth vision. Now it's going to be confirmed here in the fifth vision. And so we see this here in verse 1. So verse 2 says, and he said unto me, what seest thou? And I said, I have looked, and behold, a candlestick, all of gold, with a bowl upon the top of it, and his 7 lamps thereon, and 7 pipes to the 7 lamps which are upon the top thereof. Verse 3 goes on, and 2 olive trees by it, one upon the right side of the bowl, and the other upon the left side thereof. So he's pretty much describing there. He says, I looked and behold a candlestick, almost like if you remember the menorah. You've got a candlestick, olive gold, and with a bowl upon the top of it, 7 lamps thereon, 7 pipes to the 7 lamps. So you got that picture of something of a menorah, if we could call it that, a candlestick. And then there's 2 olive trees on the side of it. And you've got 7 pipes to the 7 lamps. So you got pipes, connecting to the lamps, and you've got 2 olive trees next to the pipes connecting to this menorah here. If you can visualize that. And so he's talking about this in 2 olive trees by it, one on the right side, one on the left. That's where we're at by the time we get to verse 3. And so you pretty much, when we go back and we look at the concept of candlesticks in the Bible, I don't know if we want to go extremely, there's one verse I do want to focus on. But when you go back and you read about it, and we're not going to go too deep into these verses here, but I will give a reference to it. Remember building the tabernacle in Exodus. It's Exodus 25, verses 31 through 40. There's talking about the candlestick there. You've got the lampstand, specifically the golden, when crafting the golden lampstand for the tabernacle, it had 7 branches and it had to be lit continually. You see that there. Internet, make sure it's good. Okay, we're good. So we'll keep going. Uh, so Exodus chapter 25, verses 31 through 40, talk about um, the mentioning of the golden lampstand. Talks about that there. So we're not going to turn to it, but that's a good cross reference if you need to read up more about it. Revelation chapter 1, verses 12. We'll look there real quick. Revelation chapter 1, verse 12. Another mentioning concerning candlesticks, lampstands, things like that. Well, you see it all in the Bible, just so we know where it is and what it is. I'm seeing more breaking in the internet, so hopefully this is all being filmed okay. But we see here in Revelation chapter 1, verse 12, it says that, and I turned to see the voice that spake with me, and being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. So you're seeing more about the golden candlesticks, and you're seeing it here in verse 12. And being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. You see this here. It's going to talk about the little flock churches in there. If you look at Revelation 2, verse 5, and he says, remember therefore from whence thou art fallen, and repent, and do the first works, or else I will come unto thee quickly, and remove thy candlestick out of its place. So again, when it comes to reference of the churches and everything that's talking about, I'll remove from you the little flock churches, unless if you don't repent, I'll remove your candlestick from you. So again, it does refer to lampstands and candlesticks and things like that. Referring to the little flock churches. So that's to see there. But what we are seeing when we come to this, let me say a good one. You're just seeing these ideas here. It talks about the little flock churches. Those are something we just want to bring up. One thing I do want to bring up and kind of cross out at the same time. There's a point to that. I'll get to the point in a minute. Revelation 11:4. This is the verse where most people like to take this verse and plug it in to chapter 4 and verse 2. And this is where even in the commentaries, you'll see that they'll go here. Revelation 11, verse 4. And you'll see the 2 witnesses as they're going out into the last days, and they're prophesying, and they're breathing fire, and they're going out there, the 2 witnesses, and they prophesy 1,260 days. They're clothed in sackcloth. They're going out there preaching to the masses during the Great Tribulation. It says, these are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth, a fire and they devour their enemies. Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing that says that they can't be called the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks. I mean, clearly we see that in Zechariah chapter 4, and clearly we see that in Revelation chapter 11. The reason why I wouldn't put them here, and the reason why I wouldn't put Zechariah 3 in Revelation 11, even though it's clearly you see olive trees and candlesticks, is the context. The context, you've got these guys breathing fire, and you have these guys doing something during the Great Tribulation. Here, as we break into the context of Zechariah chapter 4, what we're going to see is the purpose of the candlesticks and the purpose of the olive trees, who they are and what they're doing and why we've been seeing 4 visions so far of post-exilic Israel. Their purpose has been to rebuild the temple, to rebuild Israel, to rebuild everything, not go through the last days. So you still can call the 2 witnesses in the tribulation candlesticks, nothing wrong with that. You can call them olive trees, nothing wrong with that. They can be olive trees over there, and you can have olive trees over here. And they can still represent what God's purposes are in the prophetic program. And God can have olive trees and candlesticks all over the place. You can have them in the tabernacle doing something over here. You can have them here, you can have them there. The point and the context and the purpose, as we rightly divide, they have to fit what God has them doing. That's what we're seeing in the study here. So when we come back to Zechariah chapter 4, and we see it in verse 2, and he said unto me, this is Zechariah, what seest thou? And I said, I have looked, and behold, a candlestick all of gold, with a bowl upon the top of it, and his 7 lamps thereon, and 7 pipes to the 7 lamps which are upon the top thereof, and 2 olive trees by it, one upon the right side of the bowl, and the other upon the left side thereof. He's about to get into what that is, and it's not. And from Zechariah chapter 1, verse 1, it's always been about rebuilding the temple, getting back into the land, making sure no countries fight with them, making sure the devil, when he accuses them, it doesn't work, making sure the high priest is restored so everything can go back into rebuilding Israel. It's not about going to the last days. So we're not going to, even though the verses look great for Revelation 11, we're not going to plug in that with this and this with that. We're going to let the verses say what they say to whom it says it to in these different audiences. So he says, in fact, verse 4 shows the fact that he even asks, what are these? So he says, so I answered and spake to the angel that talked with me, saying, what are these, my Lord? So he even asks and says, what is all this? What does this vision mean? What is this you're showing me? And so we see that there in verse 5. And said, then the angel that talked with me answered and said unto me, knowest thou not what these be? And I said, no, my Lord. So when he says, knowest thou not what these be? Again, he's not criticizing Zechariah. Pretty much, he's doing this in order to reflect on the vision. He's saying this because we know that you've got Joshua, the high priest. He knows all about candlesticks. He knows all about olive trees. He knows all about olive oil. He knows all about all the things that have to do with the temple. So it's not that they don't know what it is, and Zechariah, being a prophet, wouldn't also know what that is. But as far as the vision, the context of the vision itself, he's unsure of what it is. And so the angel of the Lord, the pre-incarnate Lord Jesus Christ, wants him to think about what that is. So the question is there not to criticize him, saying, don't you know what this? It's not that tone, it's not that attitude that he's coming at him with. Verse 4, sorry. Verse 5 is saying, knowest thou not what these be? It's the question that gets him, really wants him to think. And knowest thou not what these be? It's to get him to concentrate, to think, to really get him thinking about what this vision is, to reflect on, understand it, because Zechariah and Joshua, they know what candlesticks are and so forth. So the purpose is to engage Zechariah in the learning process more, to allow him to think deeply about the vision and its implications. So it's God trying to help him to arrive at a deeper understanding of the message. But in the end, he says, no, my Lord. Know what these mean? He says, no, my Lord. No, I don't. In other words. So verse 6 says, then he answered and spake unto me, saying, this is the word of the Lord unto Zerubbabel, saying, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. So what the Lord, if you notice, what the Lord doesn't do is what we just did. We said, let's look at Exodus chapter 25 and go here. Let's go to Revelation chapter. The Lord doesn't say, well, Zechariah, let's go to the book of Exodus and let's go see the candlestick over here. He didn't say, he kind of showed him the vision and said, essentially here in verse 6, this is what it is. It's the word of the Lord unto Zerubbabel, saying, and here's what this vision is essentially broadcasting to you. It's saying, everything that we were just touching on through the fourth vision, saying, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. And so he starts out with that in verse 6. So in verse 6, he's actually saying a lot there. And so he's not saying, let's go look at the candlestick and let's go examine everywhere in my word so far where we've seen the candlestick in Exodus chapter. We did that for our benefit. But the Lord says, it's the word of the Lord unto Zerubbabel, where he's saying, you're going to be doing everything in order to restore the temple, and it's not going to be by your might. And it's not going to be by your efforts, and it's not going to be by your spirit. It's not going to be by your works. Well, it's going to be by your works, but it's not going to be by your efforts, as we see there. He's saying, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit. And we see that there. So we see that there. He's talking about in the context of rebuilding the temple after the Babylonian exile. They talk about this, how they had to face so many challenges in the rebuilding process. It's not going to be achieved by, human strength, by getting more people than they already have. They already have a lot of people, getting more resources or even political power from somewhere. They don't need to go to Egypt and get more people. They don't need to go back to Babylon and get more power from somebody else or something like that, but by reliance upon the Lord himself, specifically the guidance of God's Spirit. It underscores the importance of depending on God's direction and enablement for such a time as this, and the fulfilling of his purposes. And we'll see such verse if you go back to Psalms. You'll see multiple Psalms where it talks about Psalms 20. We'll start there. Psalm chapter 20, and we're going to look at, I believe, verse 6. But the same concept is being taught. You just see it in the Psalm. Where it's very much saying, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit. So you'll see something to that effect. Psalm chapter 20, verse 6 says, now know I that the Lord saveth his anointed. He will hear him from his holy heaven with the saving strength of his right hand. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we will remember the name of the Lord our God. They are brought down and fallen, but we are risen and stand upright. Save, Lord, let the King hear us when we call. So you see this kind of a concept played out in Psalm chapter 20. We look at Psalm 33, and we'll see in verse 16. Just staying in the Psalms there. Psalm 33 and verse 16. And he says, there is no king saved by the multitude of an host. A mighty man is not delivered by much strength. So we see that there. And he says, let's see. And horse is a vain thing for safety, neither shall he deliver any by his great strength. Behold, the eye of the Lord is upon them that fear him, upon them that hope in his mercy, to deliver their soul from death and to keep them alive from famine. Our soul waiteth for the Lord. He is our hope, our help, and our shield. So you see this in Psalm 33. And it says, for our heart shall rejoice in him because we have trusted in his holy name. Goes on from there. Psalm 44, so we go there. Psalm 44, verse 3. Psalm 44, verse 3 says, for they got not the land in possession by their own sword, neither did their own arm save them, but thy right hand and thine arm, and the light of thy countenance, because thou hast a favor unto them. Thou art my king, O God. Command deliverances for Jacob. Through thee will we push down our enemies. Through thy name will we tread under them that rise up against us. For I will not trust in my bow, neither shall my sword save me. But thou hast saved us from our enemies, and hast put them to shame that hated us. In God we boast all the day long, and praise thy name forever. Selah. So you see the ideas where it's played over and over again in the Psalms, where God is praised, not the horse, not the weapons, not the men, not the things of mankind. So you see this over again in Psalm 20, Psalm 33, Psalm 44, and then it just goes on and on throughout the Psalms. But that's kind of what we're seeing when you get back to Zechariah chapter 4, verse 6. This is the word of the Lord unto Zerubbabel, saying, not by might nor by power. They're not going to be able to do this under their own power. And you're seeing this in the first 4 visions, now in the first 5 visions. And this is supposed to be of great encouragement. That's why the first 5 visions of Zechariah are supposed to be great hope, great encouragement, because it's showing God's power in effect, God's work in effect for the post-exilic group. They're not going to be able to do this without God. And God's clearing the path and making the way for them so they can get things moving along, so that they can do the work of the Lord. and God's making sure that they have an abundant path clear to do what needs to be done. So we see that in verse 6, not by might nor by spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. We see that there. So they go through and they do this. So this message would encourage Zerubbabel and Joshua, the high priest, reminding them that despite any difficulties they come across, they can rely on God, and God would empower them to complete and rebuild the temple. So we see that there. So we get into verse 7. And so as we get into verse 7 now, it says, Who art thou, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, thou shalt become a plain, and he shall bring forth the headstone thereof with shoutings, crying, Grace, grace unto it. Of course, what we're seeing here is he's saying, who art thou, O great mountain? So this is still talking about what God is replying back to Zechariah in this vision. And he's saying, not by might nor by power, or I'm sorry, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. And he continues, going into verse 7. God is continuing into verse 7, saying, Who art thou, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, thou shalt become a plain. Now, when he's saying, O great mountain, he's saying pretty much whatever a difficulty is in the Bible, he's referring to a difficulty, whatever difficulty that comes their way, whatever issue, whatever problem, whether it was those four horns in the second vision, God will deal with them. Whatever, even if it's Satan come along and accusing them, like in, I believe it was the third vision, maybe it was the third, no, I'm sorry, it's the fourth vision. And whether it's Satan accusing them, whether it's four horns coming up against them, whether it's anything else, pretty much what you're seeing there, whatever mountain they come across, a mountain full of problems, God says, Who art thou, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, thou shalt become a plain. And you see this used in the Bible quite a bit. If you look at, Matthew chapter 17, and verse 20. Matthew 17, verse 20. And this is both literally and used as in the same context, where mountain is used in the form of a problem and mountain is used in the form of a mountain. So he says here in Matthew 17:20, and Jesus said unto them, Because of your unbelief, for verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. Of course, you're seeing this. This may be one way it can be said is that this mountain is like a problem. And again, I say like a problem because you could say it, and that's one way, usually a spiritual lesson type of thing, where you can say, well, this is you have a mountain of issues in your mind, you have a mountain of work you have to do at your job, you have a mountain of things. So that's one way. But when you read this literally, and we should read it literally, Matthew 17:20 is talking about a literal mountain. And of course, in the tribulation, mountains will be shaken, mountains will be moved, mountains will be literally taken apart. So this is something this way. Literal mountains will be taken literally apart and moved by the Lord. This is something what you're seeing in Matthew 17:20. But the point is that you're seeing the word mountain being used as a way of explaining things like a problem. And when you bring it back to Zechariah chapter 4, verse 7, and you say, Who art thou, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, thou shalt become a plain. So he's saying, before this guy, any problem is going to be just crushed. I'll make sure any problem that comes before post-exilic Israel under the leadership of Zerubbabel gets crushed, gets destroyed. By my spirit, I'll make sure that he is able to rebuild rebuild the temple. And of course, that's why Nehemiah is able to set up the walls. That's why Ezra is able to reestablish Israel under law. That's why reconstruction and rebuilding is able to take place from post-exilic Israel. He's pretty much saying there in verse 7, Who art thou, O great mountain? He's encouraging Zerubbabel as a leader, saying, whatever problem, whatever mountain comes your way, even a little one, it's going to become a plain before you. I'll make sure. Essentially, God is saying, it's going to become a plain before you, O Zerubbabel. And then it continues on in verse 7, and he shall bring forth the headstone thereof with shoutings, crying, Grace, grace unto it. And of course, now what that is, that's a picture of Ezra chapter 3 and Ezra chapter 6. What that is when they rebuild the temple, they put that last piece of stone up on the temple that they rebuild after they come back from the Babylonian captivity. They come back, they put the headstone or the capstone or the final stone on that temple. And as they put that headstone, they put it up and they start shouting for joy because they've actually rebuilt the temple that they set out to do. And they cry, grace, grace. And if we look at Ezra chapter 3, verse 11, and that's the book of Ezra chapter 3 in verse 11. You're going to see that there. It starts out here in Ezra 3:11, and it says, and they sang together by course in praising and giving thanks unto the Lord, because he is good, for his mercy endureth forever toward Israel. And all the people shouted with a great shout when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. So this is where they're laying the foundation. But many of the priests and Levites and chief of the fathers, who were ancient men, but had seen the first house, when the foundation of this house was laid before their eyes, wept with a loud voice, and many shouted aloud for joy, so that the people could not discern the noise of the shout of joy from the noise of the weeping of the people. For the people shouted with a loud shout, and the noise was heard far off. Now, what that's talking about is when they were taken away in their Babylonian captivity, some of them were like 9 years old, 10 years old. Then they went away for 70 years. Now they're going back and they're rebuilding it. They're like 89 or 80 years old, and they're thinking back to when they saw the first temple when they were 8 years old or 9 years old or 10 years old. Now they're 89 years old or 79 years old or however old they are. And they're seeing another temple get rebuilt, or at least they're seeing the foundation, and they're starting to shout and weep and cry and rejoice, and they're thrilled to death that they actually went through 70 years of captivity. They're alive to see everything get rebuilt again, and they're just weeping for joy. So we go to Ezra chapter 6. Ezra chapter 6, verse 15. And you see it again. But it says here in Ezra 6:15, and this house was finished on the third day of the month Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. And the children of Israel, the priests and the Levites, and the rest of the children of the captivity, kept the dedication of this house of God with joy, and offered the dedication of this house of God 100 bullocks, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and for a sin offering of all Israel, 12 he-goats according to the number of the tribes of Israel. And it goes on and on and on. But they build the house, they build the temple, and and he says here, as you're seeing through the visions of Zechariah, that he's saying he's encouraging Zerubbabel. He's saying whatever problems you're going to have, whatever mountains, they'll become plains. And he says, and he shall, Zerubbabel, you'll bring forth the headstone there with shoutings. You'll see it in Ezra chapter 3. You'll see it in Ezra chapter 6. And they're going to be crying, grace, grace unto it, until that last capstone, that last headstone, that last stone gets set up on the temple. As you rebuild what you set out to rebuild, everyone's going to be crying and screaming and shouting for joy as you rebuild it. This is what's being told in the fifth vision. As you rebuild it, you'll see it in Ezra 3, you'll see it in Ezra 6, you'll see the rebuilding, you see the rejoicing, you'll see the joy. And so he says that there. And he says, moreover, now we're in verse 8. It says, Zechariah chapter 4, verse 8. Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, now we're in verse 9, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. We saw that in Ezra 3, and his hands also, or shall also finish it. And thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto you. And so he just pretty much goes forth and explains this. It's kind of basic. It's really nothing to break down there. Just saying that the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. It makes sense. That's what we saw. And his hands also shall also finish it. They'll finish it. Makes sense. Thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto you. Kind of basic there. So verse 10 is saying, for who hath despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those 7. They are the eyes of the Lord which run to and fro through the whole earth. And so when we get into verse 10, what we're seeing here is that it emphasizes the importance of not underestimating or disregarding small beginnings, which is what was happening after their 70-year captivity. You know, who despises the day of small things? When small things become things start out small and then they get bigger and then they get bigger and then they get bigger. So who's despising the days of small things? You know, small victory is still a victory. A small thing is still a great thing when it turns into an even greater thing. And so he's saying, verse 10, who hath despised the day of small things? Now, these may be seemingly insignificant achievements, but they're going to turn out to be greater things as they start rebuilding. You know, one brick upon another brick turns into a wall, one brick into another brick turns into a temple, turns into a city, turns into the total rebuilding of the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, everything, just little by little as they all return. It encourages the people to, you know, recognize the value of modest progress. It's going to take time, it's going to take place, and have faith in their humble beginnings. And if we see that, even if we go back one book to Haggai, you see, I believe it's in Haggai chapter 2, verse 2. And Haggai chapter 2, verse 2, because of course Haggai is your other prophet who's kind of working with Zerubbabel. He says, speak now to Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest, and to the residue of the people, saying, who is left among you that saw this house in her first glory? And how do ye see it now? Is it not in your eyes in comparison of it as nothing? Yet now be strong, O Zerubbabel, saith the Lord, and be strong, O Joshua, son of Josedek, the high priest, and be strong, all ye people of the land, saith the Lord, and work, for I am with you, saith the Lord of hosts. And then it kind of goes on from there. But you're seeing the message that Haggai is saying is just to be as encouraging as the message that Zechariah is doing, only it's through 8 visions. At least that's how it's starting, with 8 visions. So the message through Haggai and through Zechariah is encouragement, is to work, rebuild, reconstruct, go, do it. The Lord's with you. The Lord is encouraging you. Go, go, go. So you see that there. And so this is what you're seeing in, we're in verse 10, who hath despised the day of small things. That's how it's starting out there. And it says, who hath despised the day of small, for they shall rejoice. We saw that when we looked at Zechariah chapter 2 in verse 10. It says, sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for lo, I come and will dwell in the midst of thee. That's something that will happen. That was a messianic promise where it will come to pass. He says, for they shall rejoice, that's true, and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those 7. So now it's talking about, you know, so see a plummet. Now, a plummet is a measuring line or a plumb line used in construction to ensure, you know, straightness and alignment. So it's a tool, it's a construction tool. And so when he goes through this, it says this here, it says, for they shall rejoice and shall see the plummet, there's that tool, in the hand of Zerubbabel with those 7. Referring to, again, back to the 7 lamps on the golden lampstand, you know, originally seen in the vision. And they are the eyes of the Lord, which run to and fro throughout the whole earth. So it's God's watchful and providential care, continually overseeing the progress of post-exilic Israel as they continuously rebuild and everything else. God's aware of Zerubbabel's efforts, and he's actively involved in making sure that they have a clear path to continue to grow and continue to rebuild. His eyes are over everything. If you look at 2 Chronicles 16, verse 9, you'll see this come up again to cross-refer it to, and that's 2 Chronicles 16 and verse 9. That's what we read here. So take a look at that. It's talking about they are the eyes of the Lord which run to and fro through the whole earth. That's in Zechariah. Second Chronicles 16:9 says, for the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, to show himself strong in the behalf of them whose heart is perfect toward him. Herein thou hast done foolishly, for therefore from henceforth thou shalt have wars. This is in regards to what's going on in chapter 16. But it does say, for the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, to show himself strong in behalf of them whose heart is perfect toward him. So it starts out there. And if you look at Proverbs, I believe it's 15. Proverbs 15, verse 3, I believe is the cross reference there. You see the eyes of the Lord again. And then Proverbs 15, verse 3, more details about the eyes of the Lord. It says that the eyes of the Lord are in every place. Talking about his omnipotence, talking about his omniscience. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. There's nothing that he doesn't see. But as you bring it back to Zechariah chapter 5, and you're seeing it here in verse 10, he's referring there to the fact that it says, for who hath despised the day of small things, those small beginnings, for they shall rejoice and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those seven eyes. They are the eyes of the Lord, which run to and fro throughout the whole earth. We had talked about in the last vision that stone with 7 eyes were the 7 spirits of God. They have a messianic figure, messianic prophecy. Again, it's talking about the eyes of the Lord in this one, that ability to see everywhere, everything, every place, whether it's the 4 horns being dealt with, whether it's Satan and his accusations being dealt with, whether it be the nations that are going to be dealt with. We'll get into those in the last 3 visions. Everything is going to be dealt with so that they have a clear path to do what needs to be done. And of course, the way we know this is he's saying it's going to be by my spirit, not by might, nor by power, but by God's spirit. He'll see everything. He'll take care of everything. He knows everything. He knows how to deal with everything so that post-exilic Israel has that clear path and can do what needs to be done. So he goes and explains this so that things can move about. Verse 11 and 12, they're still looking, Zechariah is still looking at that original vision. He's still looking at the candlesticks, and he's still seeing I believe it was the olive trees. So he asks 2 questions. And he's still looking at the original, and he's understanding a lot that's going on, but he's still saying, still got some questions. Verse 11 and verse 12 says, Then answered I, and said unto him, What are these 2 olive trees upon the right side of the candlestick, and upon the left side thereof? And he says, And I answered again. So he's saying, I got another thing to ask, another thing here. And said unto him, What be these 2 olive branches, which through the 2 golden pipes empty the golden oil out of themselves? So it kind of sounds like in verse 11 and verse 12, he's asking the same thing twice almost. It's what it looks like. But when you look at it, you're seeing that he's in Zechariah 4:11, he's asking about the identity and the position of the 2 olive trees in relation to the candlestick. So he's asking about the 2 olive trees. Zechariah 4:12, now he says, what's the purpose and the function of the 2 olive branches and supplying the oil to the lamp? So he's asking some descriptive things, one about the olive trees and one about the olive branches that lead into the trees. From the lamps, so you've got this menorah, you have some pipes that go from the menorah into the trees. He's saying, well, what's the point? What's the purpose? Why we have pipes going from a menorah into these olive trees? What's the purpose? What's the point? What's happening not only with who are the olive trees, and why are the pipes leading from the menorah? I'm calling it menorah. Why do we have pipes leading from the menorah into the trees? Who are the trees, and what are the pipes doing? That's what he's essentially asking. So we see that in verse 11 and 12. And so just real quick, just to go over the olive tree, this is something we kind of looked at when we went through the parable of the fig tree. If you remember that, we had gone through and we had looked at, I believe we went to Judges chapter 9, and we had talked about the olive tree, the fig tree, the vine tree, the bramble tree. We saw a little bit about the myrtle tree in Zechariah chapter 1. So we see all about Israel's type of trees, but we had gone through and we had looked at, I believe it was Luke 21, I think it was. And we also took a look at the parable of the fig tree. We took a look at that. And the Lord had said, Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When her branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, you know that summer is near. He had talked about that. And then we had turned into Judges chapter 9, verses 6 through 15. We saw all these different types of trees Israel has. And one of them was the olive tree. and we had studied that out, and we saw through 1 Kings 6:31 that the olive tree usually is all about, in some way, shape, or form, something about having access to God, or God will give access. God will work, give some type of access in some way, shape, or form with regards to his plan, his purpose. The fig tree had something that was Israel's religion given to them by God. The vine tree was Israel's national life. God's Lord Jesus said, "I am the true vine." The bramble was idolatry. The myrtle tree is restoration. But the olive tree was about having that access to God, or God giving access, granting access, doing something. In this case, we're seeing two olive trees uh, come into play because God is granting all this access to the post-exilic group as they come out. And then that restoration concerning the myrtle tree in the first vision, you're seeing the myrtle tree, you're seeing the olive tree, access is being granted, restoration is coming. So we're seeing this come into play here. So, but this is what he's asking those questions. What does this vision mean? What do these things do? What's the point? What's the purpose? What's going on here? And Zechariah 4:11 and 12. And so, verse 13, God wants him to think again. And he said, and he answered me and said, "Knowest thou not what these be?" And again, not to criticize him, he's not mad at him, he's not yelling at him. He wants him thinking again. He wants them to think, to get them, concerned and wondering about what there could be. And I said, "No, my Lord," and he doesn't know. To the first time, so verse 14 says, and said he, "These are the two anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth." Now again, it's a normal thing to go and say, well, that must be Revelation chapter 11, verse 4 again. That must be the two who are the two witnesses who breathe fire and testify before the Lord during the Antichrist. And it's normal to run there and take that verse and plug it in here. But again, it wouldn't make sense to take those two because there's no reason to go and take those two. And again, it's not that, what was it, Revelation 11:4, if I can just go there again for a minute. Right, it looks like it fits like a charm, though. I mean, it's not like it's a terrible verse. There is no such thing as a terrible verse. But, when you read Revelation 11:4, and it says, "These are the two olive trees and the two candlesticks standing before the God of the earth." Again, the context of that verse is still talking about how they're going to go forth, and if any man hurts them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devoureth their enemies. And if any man hurts them, they must in this manner be killed. These have the power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy. So they're able to stop it from raining. They're able to breathe fire. They're able to kill people. I mean, this is for a time where it's the ages to come, and it's the Daniel 70th week, and they're out there to proclaim God, and they're out there to finish their testimony, and then the beast will ascend out of the bottomless pit and make war against them and kill them. That's a very different context for a different plan and purpose. What God has planned for these two olive trees, for these two candlesticks. They're still olive trees and they're still candlesticks, and they still will play their part in the book of Revelation. There's no doubt about it. But when you see it here, as we plug it back into Zechariah chapter 4, verse 14, says, and said he, "These are the two anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth." Now they're standing by the Lord of the whole earth during the time when it's time to rebuild Israel, when it's time to rebuild after the 70-year captivity. That's not when it's time to have people breathing fire and people stopping the rain and people, fighting against the Antichrist. That's not that time there. This is where it's time to rebuild Israel, start building up some walls and start building up some cities and start building up. It's two different points in time. Well, you got your candlesticks over there and you got your candlesticks over here. So that's at least where I'm finding that, you got candlesticks for candlesticks, and they're both candlesticks. So it's just the context of where they all fit in. Commentaries like to say it's all one big candlestick. And so these, you take Zechariah 4 and you put it in Revelation 11, and you take Revelation, you put it in 4, and you mix the two, and it's you make them all one big candlestick, and it gets kind of confused. That's why the visions of Zechariah get so tough in the first place. We let those candlesticks be candlesticks in Revelation 11 for the context in which they fit. And we're going to let the Zechariah 4 candlesticks be the vision, or be the candlesticks for Zechariah 4, which are Zerubbabel and Joshua. Zerubbabel and Joshua is what the whole thing has been talking about since Zechariah 1, Zechariah 2, Zechariah 3, Zechariah 4. These are the two anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth. And that's why we saw that back in Zechariah chapter 3. Joshua the high priest was restored to his position. And so we saw that there. They were filled with the Spirit and given the capability to the respective roles to restore the temple. And so they did that. They're entrusted with the responsibility of standing before the Lord of the whole earth, symbolizing their close relationship with God and their role as representatives of his divine authority on earth. For example, if you look at 1 Samuel 16, 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 12, you see this with King David. And here's where the whole vision clicks. Here's where the whole vision comes together. 1 Samuel 16 and verse 12. You have King David show up on the scene. It says, as we'll go to verse 11. It says, and Samuel said unto Jesse, are here all thy children? And he said, there remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither. And he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy, and withal of a beautiful countenance, and goodly to look to. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is he. Then Samuel took the horn of oil, and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. Now there's your oil, there's your olive oil, there's your even you got stuff pouring out of the olive oil, the horn of oil. It's being poured onto, in this case, King David. And what happens right after that? Anointed him in the midst of his brethren, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So you pour the olive oil on King David, and the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and so on and so forth. So you're seeing that oil gets poured onto King David, even as a young man there, and the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him. Again, it's covenantal. It's all based on his work. You know, in Acts chapter 5, the Spirit of the Lord's killing people. So in prophecy, it's all covenant standing. It's all, based on their performance according to law, and so on and so forth. So it's a different ministry for a different audience, different people, different times, different dispensation. But nonetheless, when you plug it into what we're seeing here in Zechariah chapter 4, now you're seeing, you got a menorah, you've got pipes coming out of the menorah pouring onto, in this case, Zerubbabel and Joshua. So you've got the same Spirit being poured out onto Zerubbabel and Joshua, just like you see the example in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 12, the concept. And so it gets poured out onto them. And so what he's seeing in this, it's supposed to be another encouraging vision saying that my Spirit, again, not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit. That's what we see there in verse 6, saith the Lord, that it's going to be poured out. These leaders are going to be Spirit filled or Spirit led or Spirit, divinely provided for in all that they do as leaders for this post-exilic group. And we saw everything taking place with Joshua the high priest in the fourth vision. Now we're seeing the leaders that are going to be charged up in the fifth vision. And to the point where when they put that last capstone on the temple, God's saying, you're going to be the leader who makes this happen. You're going to be the one who takes things and makes things happen, Zerubbabel. Zechariah tells Zerubbabel that. This is the fifth vision showing that, you will make things happen. By my Spirit, you will make things happen. By my Spirit, we'll make sure the four horns don't touch you. By my Spirit, we'll make sure that we measure Jerusalem. By my Spirit, we'll make sure that all these, a multitude of things take place, is where he's going in the fifth vision. And that's a great encouragement to this group. So we see that there. And so kind of backing up into verse 11 and 12 and 13 and 14, that's why he's asking those questions. the Lord is talking with Zechariah, and he's explaining. He's not saying per se, like we were saying earlier, Zechariah, go to Exodus chapter 25 and read all about it. He's saying, this is what I want you to know. And he's saying, well, then what does this mean? And what does that mean? He's saying, this is what I want you to know. Well, then what does that mean? This is what I want you to know. So this is kind of how this vision plays out. So, what it is. And it's just explaining that these two are my leaders. These are my men on the scene. I will pour out my spirit onto them. You see that in Acts chapter 2. You see it in 1 Samuel 16, I think it was. Yeah, 16. And, they will set up the temple. Up to that last capstone, they'll do it. And with shoutings and cryings, grace, grace unto it. And so we see that there. And it says that thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto you. And then so, and it says, even to the point where he says, for who hath despised the day of small things? If you, don't despise anything small that's happening now. It will lead into great things. And, they'll see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel. But when they see Zerubbabel with, a construction tool in his hand, they'll know that the eyes of the Lord are upon everything that's happening here. They'll know that it's by God's Spirit, everything is happening here. So it's a great encouraging vision for Israel here in this one. So I think we got everything we wanted to say here, but pretty much for that, we'll stop here, see if there's any kind of thoughts or comments on what we just went through. Next couple of visions, it's going to take a different tone. Still going to be encouraging for this faithful remnant who's come out of the Babylonian captivity, but instead of being constantly encouraging, as the first 5 visions have been, it's going to be more towards, let's pour out the wrath now. Let's pour out the wrath on those nations that were wicked towards you. And let's talk about the 6th, 7th, and 8th vision, how we're really going to get them. Israel. We're not going to get you, Israel. You're the good guys. We're going to get these other guys now. And so that's going to be more encouraging towards Israel. And some of it won't play out until you get to the ages to come. Some of it won't play out until you get the full, total, absolute wrap up in the book of Revelation. But nonetheless, promises are made. And we'll get into that in the 6th and 7th and 8th vision. So with that, we'll stop here, see if there's any kind of thoughts or comments or anything on the 5th vision.
I do. I have a question I want to ask. Is there anywhere in scripture that Moses and Elijah have been spoken as candlesticks?
Just in Revelation 11:4.
Just in Revelation 11. Okay.
Yeah,
So if somebody's studying Zechariah in this 5th vision, there's no way in chapter in verse 14, then said these are the 2 anointed ones. There's no way that they could mistake Moses and Elijah for being those 2 anointed ones.
Well, there's an easy way they can mistake it.
Yeah, because see, I have my notes in here say that. I just now scratched it all out.
Yeah, because there's absolutely a very easy way. Because Revelation 11:4 says these are olive trees, these are candlesticks. And I mean, Revelation 4 says olive trees, candlesticks.
But does it say anything about Moses and Elijah being those
Well,
olive trees or candlesticks?
You have to kind of go back and see, and you've got people stopping rain, and I think the other one was talking about fire, something like that. Well, you see Elijah stopping rain in one case, and I think the other one was fire, something like that, breathing fire or something. There's you got to refer to the part about Moses and fire. I've got to cross refer. There's a part where Moses
Okay.
does something with fire.
Okay.
I have to or maybe it's I have to remember where that's at. But there's also others that say it's not Moses, it's somebody else. And then right now, that's not something I want to go to war with on somebody about who the 2 witnesses are. But some people say it's Moses and Elijah. Some say it's Elijah and somebody
But
else.
it's definitely not in Zechariah.
Well, I wouldn't see it there because the whole point and purpose from verse 1 has always been the rebuilding of Israel. When you go into Revelation 11:4, you don't see anything about the rebuilding of Israel. You've got two different stories going. You got two different points in time where things are going on. And it's just like with the four horses in Zechariah chapter 1. You've got four horses in Zechariah chapter 1. They're not the four horses of Revelation chapter 6, but people who don't know will take the four horses and say, well, these are the same four horses, clearly. And they're not. They're just four horses here, four horses there. And there you've got two candlesticks here, or two olive trees here, two olive trees there. You have candlesticks here, candlesticks there. And the context of which these horses, candlesticks, and olive trees fit have to be where God puts them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're trying to make everything the same thing.
Well, that's kind of why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, it makes more sense being Joshua.
Yeah. And it's fine if God says, well, no, you're my candlesticks over here, and you're my candlesticks over here, and you're my candlesticks over here. I mean, God can call a couple people candlesticks if it fits the context of, if it's a narrative of the context or the point of what God's trying to make.
Yeah. Also, I want to ask you a question. Would Joshua or would the people, Zechariah here, consider this as divine intervention by God?
I would say so. I mean, his vision or the action that's taking.
No, the action that he's saying is going to take place.
I would say so, because because God's even telling him, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit. I mean,
Okay.
everything that's taking place.
Okay.
Which is typical of Israel.
Yeah, typical in prophecy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, trying to remember what that. I see. And let me go back to Revelation 11:4. Let me see if it's So I know it's Elijah who stops the what's it called? He stops the rain. I know that through his 1 Kings 17. But fire proceeds out of their mouth.
Verse 6.
Oh, well, I know it's fire proceeds out of heaven. That's also Elijah.
Okay, verse 4 says, these are the two olive trees and two candlesticks, and what God has done. So that's Elijah and that's Moses.
Yeah, I'm trying to see where Moses comes from. Oh, there it is. There it is. It's in verse 6. This is where it comes from. Now, people disagree, and that's fine. I'm not going to war with them over it. It says, these have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy. So it doesn't rain. That's 1 Kings 17. And have power over waters to turn them to blood. Well, Moses did that. That was in Exodus 7:19.
Yeah.
So that's where it comes from, at least the
Okay.
idea that it's Moses and Elijah. And some people say, well, it's not Moses, it's this guy, or it's not Elijah, it's that guy. Yeah, I'm not going to fight over.
But it's definitely not Elijah and Moses being spoken to and we're speaking about.
The only
Is
reason
Zechariah?
I don't see how it could be in that context. It just doesn't fit where we're at this point in time.
Yeah, it wouldn't seem to.
Yeah.
But I could see where somebody would make
Yeah,
that.
a lot of commentaries will say, well, these are the two witnesses in Revelation, and then you say, well, okay, but why?
Yeah.
Why were we jumping over there all of a sudden?
Yeah, and why rebuilding Israel or rebuilding Jerusalem? Why would Moses and Elijah be involved?
And that's fine if it's Moses and Elijah. Okay, great. What are they doing? What are they doing helping rebuild Israel in the middle of? They do show up in
You've got
Matthew.
Zechariah, you got Joshua on the scene anyway.
They show up in Matthew 17 for the transformation. Okay. Or do they show up in Zechariah for the rebuilding of Israel? If they do, just show me more and more and more where this connects.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I don't see a connection.
Yeah, but I guess I just want to get that clarified because people would say that.
Commentaries do, and commentaries is where church leaders go to. So now you have whole denominations running into that.
Well, like I said, I had it in my notes. I just now had to scratch it out.
Yeah. Well, you can.
Well, no, it makes perfect sense because this is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
In this time and age, it's Joshua and
Yeah.
Zerubbabel.
Yeah.
It's easy for you to say.
So I don't know if anyone else had any thoughts or comments on it. So, yeah, we'll wrap up here in Zechariah's fifth vision, and we'll start getting into the sixth, seventh, and eighth vision, and that'll lead into a different tone. That'll lead into God saying, okay, now we're going to start getting into visions of wrath towards the other nations now. You've had 5 encouraging visions, Israel, or Zechariah. Now it's time for 3 visions of wrath towards those who would do you harm and would do you wrong. So let's get some wrath going now on the 6th, 7th, and 8th vision.
It should be very clear to Zechariah by this point, after 5 visions, what the purpose of rebuilding Israel is, or rebuilding Jerusalem is.
Yeah.
Who all is involved in that?
Yeah. And then I would sure hope no one goes and reads this today and says, well, that's material for me. I mean, read that.
No,
You know.
I don't know why it would be. I mean, we're not rebuilding Israel. We're not trying to.
Well, some people
rebuild
think they
Jerusalem.
are.
I know.
well, yeah, that's true.
You got people on TV saying,
Yeah. We gotta help support Israel and rebuild it.
Yeah.
And all that, you know,
Yeah.
So, all right, yeah, we'll stop here, and we'll be back here on let's see, Wednesday. We'll be back here Sunday with the 6th vision. So yeah, we'll wrap up here. So, all right, thanks for everyone joining us.
Everybody.
Yeah, we'll see everyone later.